The rain fell in steady sheets against the windows of Clarence's house, creating a world of gray and shadow in the private quarters where Queen Camilla sat alone. It was a night for quiet reflection, a moment stolen from the relentless machinery of royal duty. Her fingers, adorned with a few simple gold bands, traced the edge of a velvet-lined box that lay open on the polished mahogany table before her. Inside, resting on a bed of white satin, was the brooch. The light from a single lamp caught the stones, and they answered with a fire that had been banked for over a century. It was an extraordinary piece, a cascade of diamonds and sapphires shaped into a bar with a central cabochon-cut sapphire the size of a thumbnail and two larger cushion-shaped sapphires hanging below, all surrounded by a latticework of brilliant diamonds. The design was subtly archaic, hinting at a world of empires and czars. This was the Hesse Diamond Jubilee brooch, a ghost from the vaults of history, and its presence here in her hands felt like a secret shared across the ages. Camilla had never expected to wear it publicly. For years it was enough to know it existed, a gift from her husband, a silent testament to a love that had weathered decades of storms. But the weight of the crown had changed things. The death of Queen Elizabeth II had reshaped the world, and in the solemn days of national mourning, every gesture, every jewel carried a message. As the new queen consort, Camilla understood the language of these silent symbols better than most. The brooch was not just an ornament. It was a statement of continuity, of her place in a lineage that stretched back to Queen Victoria herself. As she looked at it, the memory of the day it had nearly been lost forever came rushing back with a clarity that still made her stomach clench. It wasn't a state occasion or a grand ceremony where the drama had unfolded, but a mundane, forgettable moment on a motorway service station. The setting was almost absurdly ordinary. The Beaconsdale services off the M40, a fluorescent-lit purgatory of petrol pumps, fast food wrappers, and weary travelers. It was the spring of 2022, and she and Charles, then the Prince of Wales, were preparing for a 3-day tour of Canada. The schedule was punishing, the logistics a nightmare of suitcases and security details. The brooch, a piece she intended to wear for a gala in Ottawa, was packed securely away, not in the main royal luggage, but in a small, discreet attaché case, innocuously labeled HRH, the Duchess of Cornwall. It was a deliberate choice, an attempt to keep it safe from prying eyes by hiding it in plain sight. The royal convoy had stopped for fuel and a quick coffee. The 3 royal aides in charge of the support vehicle, a sturdy estate car, saw it as a routine break. One stepped out for a cigarette, stretching his legs in the damp air. The other 2 went inside the main building to grab takeaway coffees. In their haste, in the sheer boredom of the task, they made a catastrophic error. They left the car unlocked. And they left the bag containing the brooch, the priceless, irreplaceable heirloom, on the back seat. The theft was discovered within minutes. The aide returning from his cigarette saw the car door slightly ajar and felt a jolt of pure ice water in his veins. The bag was gone. The subsequent moments were a blur of panicked phone calls, hushed, frantic voices, and the grim realization that they had just lost a piece of the crown jewel's spiritual history. For Camilla, the news was delivered in a hushed whisper by her private secretary during a fitting for her travel wardrobe. She remembered the precise sensation, a cold dread that started in her chest and spread to her fingertips. It wasn't just the monetary value, estimated at over £20,000 in Victorian times, now incalculable as a historic artifact. It was the sentimental weight. It was a gift from Charles, a symbol of his unwavering commitment. It was a tangible link to Queen Victoria, to a grandchild's love expressed in diamonds and sapphires. To lose it would be a personal betrayal of that history, a catastrophic stain on her tenure even before it had officially begun. The decision was made in a split second, in a tense huddle of senior staff. This could not become public. The tabloids would have a field day. King's consort loses crown jewels at motorway services, was a headline that would mock the monarchy for a generation. So, a different kind of operation began. The police were contacted, but discreetly. The highest levels of the security services were quietly informed. The robbery was treated with the utmost urgency, but in a bubble of absolute secrecy. CCTV footage from the service station was obtained and reviewed by a small, trusted team. It showed a local gang, opportunistic and quick, noticing the unlocked car and the unattended bag. They had snatched it and were gone in seconds. They had no idea what they had taken. To them, it was just another bag from a posh car, likely containing a laptop or a wallet they could pawn. The tracking of the thieves was a masterclass in quiet, efficient police work. Using the CCTV, they traced the gang's movements to a rundown estate on the outskirts of High Wycombe. Within hours of the theft, a team of plainclothes officers executed a silent early-morning raid on a flat. The gang, a handful of small-time criminals, were asleep, completely unaware of the firestorm they had ignited. They hadn't even tried to sell the brooch. They had pulled it from the bag, seen the glint of jewels, and panicked. It was too hot to handle, too obviously valuable. They had stashed it in a sock drawer, hoping to figure out their next move. When the police broke down the door, they found the brooch, unharmed, still nestled in its velvet box, which was itself inside the original incriminating bag. The entire incident, from theft to recovery, lasted less than 12 hours. No charges were filed, no police report was ever officially made, and the incident was buried so deep it might as well have never happened. Now, months later, with Charles as king and herself as queen, the brooch had been given a new life. She had chosen to wear it for the first time on the most public of stages, the first state funeral of the new reign. As she pinned it to her black Fiona Clare dress, she felt a quiet thrill of defiance. She was showing the world that she was here to stay, and she was doing it with a jewel that had literally been lost and found. The world's press, focused on the younger royals, had initially missed it. But the eagle-eyed royal watchers, the ones who pored over every photograph, soon spotted it. The story of the lost Hesse brooch, missing for 126 years, was suddenly front-page news. Commentators marveled at how Charles had given his wife such a precious, historic token, a piece that had belonged to the great Queen Victoria herself. It was seen as the ultimate gesture of love and validation. But as Camilla sat in the quiet of her room, she knew the truth was more complex. The brooch was a gift, yes, but it was also a burden. It was a reminder of the immense, glittering weight of history she now carried. And it was a reminder of how close that history had come to being lost forever in a roadside cafe. Her mind drifted from the motorway robbery to another, more ethereal encounter with the past. She thought of Dumfries' house, the dilapidated 18th century estate in Ayrshire that Charles had rescued, pouring his heart and soul, and a great deal of money, into its restoration. It was 2007, and she had gone to see the progress. The house was a wreck, a sad, unloved shell of its former self. She remembered walking up the main steps, the stone cold and damp under her feet. As she entered the cavernous, empty hall, she was hit by a wave of such intense, visceral dread that she literally froze. It wasn't fear of the dark or of old buildings. It was something else, a presence, a profound and palpable sorrow that seemed to seep from the very walls. She remembered saying later, "If my hair could stand on end, it would have done." She was convinced, without a shadow of a doubt, that a ghost inhabited that house, a spirit of the past that had roamed its neglected halls for centuries. She had told Charles she didn't want to go back. Years later, when the restoration was complete, she returned. The house was warm, alive, filled with carefully chosen furniture and the buzz of activity from the Prince's Foundation. The eerie feeling was gone. The whole thing seemed to be smiling again, she had remarked. It was as if the renovation, the act of love and care, had dispelled the sorrowful spirit. She saw a parallel now with the brooch. It, too, had been lost, languishing unseen for over a century, a beautiful but forgotten relic. By bringing it back into the light, by wearing it and giving it a new purpose, she had, in a way, dispelled its own ghost. It was no longer a forgotten artifact from a bygone age. It was a living part of the monarchy's story. But the past had other ways of making itself known, ways far less romantic than ghost stories and far more personal. The revelation had come just a few months ago with the publication of a book that had sent ripples of shock through the palace. Journalist Valentine Lowe's Power and the Palace contained a passage that had nothing to do with grand strategy or political intrigue, but with a quiet conversation Camilla had once had with then Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The context was a discussion about opening support centers for victims of sexual assault. Johnson, perhaps making conversation, perhaps probing, had spoken about the bravery of survivors. It was then that Camilla, the Queen, had chosen to share a secret she had kept for over 60 years. She told him about a train journey to Paddington when she was a teenager. A man had sat next to her and had begun to harass her, his hands groping, invasive and terrifying. In that moment, frozen with fear and disgust, she had remembered her mother's teachings, a practical, no-nonsense advice for a world that could be cruel. Without a moment's hesitation, she had slipped off her shoe and with the heavy heel had brought it down with all her force on her attacker. She told Johnson, her voice reportedly calm and matter-of-fact, "I did what my mother taught me. I took off my shoe and hit him in the balls with the heel." The revelation had been a bombshell. Buckingham Palace, as was its custom with such personal disclosures, had offered no comment, retreating into a silence that spoke volumes. But for Camilla, the public airing of this memory was strangely liberating. It connected her, not to queens and empresses, but to every woman who had ever felt vulnerable, who had ever had to fight back. It was a different kind of inheritance, a legacy of resilience passed down from mother to daughter, far removed from diamonds and sapphires. It was a reminder that her life was not just a series of royal engagements, but a tapestry woven with threads of fear, defiance, love, and loss. The brooch on the table before her was one of those threads, glittering and beautiful. The ghost of Dumfries' house was another, a whisper of sadness and redemption. And the memory of that teenage girl on a train, armed only with a shoe and her mother's courage, was yet another, a foundation of steel beneath the velvet and diamonds. She looked again at the brooch. It had been a gift from a granddaughter to a queen, a symbol of imperial alliance. It had been lost to time, nearly stolen by common thieves, and finally returned to the light. It had traveled from the courts of Russia and the drawing rooms of Queen Victoria to a motorway service station, and finally, to her. Its journey mirrored her own in a strange way. Misunderstood, hidden, nearly destroyed, but ultimately enduring. A soft knock at the door announced her dresser, come to help her prepare for the next day's engagements. Camilla closed the lid of the velvet box, the soft click sounding final. The brooch's story, for now, was complete. But as she stood up, ready to face the world again, she knew her own story was still being written. The past, with all its ghosts and secrets, was not something to be feared, but something to be worn, like a jewel pinned close to the heart, a reminder of where you've been and how far you've come. The rain continued to fall against the window, but inside, the light held steady.